Welcome to All Things Chiropractic.
Well, welcome to another episode of All Things Chiropractic. I'm Paul Andrews.
And I am Dr. Mark Davini.
Welcome to today's episode. It is entitled, Pay No Attention to the Machine Behind the Curtain.
In other words, AI.
That's right. We can thank Mark for our cute titles. So, in today's podcast, we're going to explore all things AI and refer it back to chiropractic because that's what we're all about.
Exactly. So, Paul, I mean, when we think about AI, what's your perception? What do you think AI is?
So, I think it all starts years and years ago, right? What we know today as artificial intelligence really started with algorithms. And who, Mark, can you guess is one of the better industries or on algorithms?
Oh, I think if we were to say what affects our life most, I'm going to go with insurance.
You betcha. You betcha. And, you know, they've been one of, I would say, the leading proponents of algorithms because it's helped insurance companies in so many ways. I'm not going to say that it's helped providers in a ton of ways, but when you think about reviews, medical reviews, reimbursement policies, reviews of your claims, all of that stuff has and continues to happen in this automated way, right? With computers. But let's fast forward from years ago to today where really algorithms are on steroids in a sense because of technology advancements. Is that the word? Yeah. Advancements. No, that wasn't an AI glitch. I'm really a person.
I am not a robot.
Yeah.
So I have to check off the box to get him to talk.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Feed me a quarter, right? So really, there are a couple of different types of AI. So we are looking at, first one is augmented, right? So this is the augmented intelligence. So it doesn't necessarily generate any new thought, but it is programmed to do quite a bit. It's very extensive in its abilities. If you look at some of the examples that you use every day, we know that when you go to unlock your phone, you can just stare at the screen, right? And it just unlocks for you. It's easy. Or you're doing voice to text, which I still haven't really mastered all of that. Maybe it's my New England accent. But
talk about it.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
My name is Mark.
Yeah, exactly. Forget about it. So billing algorithms, right? So we've talked to insurance companies and how they use it, and they're not the only ones exclusively, obviously, that can use it. You know, the smart reviews, the smart reminders in your software, Amazon review and recommendations, all of these things, these heads up ads in social media, the more you do something, the more it knows you, those kind of things. So, all of that's programmed to basically, yes or no binary, right? 0, 1, on, off.
Your refrigerator.
Right. And so, in general, that's what we're looking at. But if we're going to loop it back to healthcare and chiropractic, Mark, what do you think are some good examples of AI in medicine today?
Well, again, kind of piggybacking off what you said, we are currently in that augmented or additional intelligence phase where we're kind of using it to help out. So, it's interesting to recognize that over 44% of people today believe that they can learn as much as their doctors through the internet. That's kind of scary. And now we actually have these algorithms that help generate information specific to you, the patient. So right now, even though we have some of that going on, the biggest two functions that AI plays in healthcare today is medical decision-making, basically what we call diagnoses, right? So medical decision-making and image interpretation, which if I were a radiologist, I might start fearing for my future a little bit. But for the most part, AI does and can read your x-rays and MRIs. So those are the two biggest. There's also some room in there for assessing risks. These are all, just like you said, algorithms that kind of follow a certain path and are predictable.
So there was an article in Forbes just a couple of days ago, and it mentioned that UCLA researchers are developing an AI model that can read MRIs with accuracy rivaling that of even the most seasoned specialist. And one of the interesting facts out of this article was that in one of the studies that were done post-COVID in the healthcare industry, AI correctly identified 68% of positive results for 297 patients. All of those 279 patients were previously classified as negative for COVID by humans.
And there we go, right there, where it's not just that they perform functions, but they actually could reach that point where they perform them better. Now, of course, you listen to any AI podcast, or if you listen or read any AI articles, they're always going to have a disclaimer in it saying AI is not designed to replace humans, that nothing can be better than the human factor. But let me ask you this. If I were a patient with a whole series of symptoms that have been going on and off for many, many years, I have this extensive amount of history and all these findings that don't seem to interact too well together or seem to make sense together, who's going to be able to put all that together and come up with possible diagnoses better? The specialist or the AI program? And like Paul is saying, they've proven the AI program is actually more accurate in compiling this kind of data and putting it together and coming up with a conclusion.
And quickly. Right? And so what's interesting is there's this term called synthetic data or data, depending on where you're coming from. I'm a Star Trek guy, so I'll say data.
Yeah.
And really what this is it's taking real data and extrapolating it out and using it so that you can test these systems like AI without harming a patient. So you can take a data set of real data and AI can extrapolate that and compound it to use it in a way that can get some meaningful statistics back.
Well, again, let's go back to our Star Trek roots, right? Run simulations.
Yeah.
AI can run simulations, and they can give you projected outcomes within certain percentages. So maybe there's a certain treatment that is within the realm of possibility, but you go, oh, I don't know if I want to do that, or should I do that, or what's the best way to do that? AI can run the simulation for you based on a compilation and an analysis of a ton more data than anything that we could do as humans. They've just proven that. There's no question about that. And that's where we are right now, is with this basically augmented type of AI where we're supplementing our information.
But really, we've become more complex. We meaning AI machines, and there's this new AI called generative. So what is that?
The generative, and some people might actually hear it referred to as ambient, but the generative AI is what we're moving into, and probably will be moving in that direction for many, many years to come. But it's the kind of AI where we're now starting to see where you put in a few words and the AI generates a whole narrative based on a few words. Or you put in who you are and what you are, and it creates a resume for you. You're a doctor, and you stand there and you give the machine a few key words, and it generates a note. Paul's going to talk about a program that does that, like, to the extreme. So generative AI is actually that advancement in augmented AI that creates things out of something else. So it's not thinking, but it's closer to thinking than augmented AI, because it's taking all that information and it's deciding through algorithms what it is it wants to say or not say, and what it wants to put down or not put down. And this becomes huge in healthcare today, because for the most part, we're talking about the biggest input into healthcare is documentation. 40 to 50% of all nurse time is spent in front of a computer. And they're basically giving us this opportunity to say, imagine there isn't even a keyboard in your treatment room. Now, I know everybody's face just smiled and everybody thinks that's the greatest thing since, sliced bread, and it can be great, but like everything else, we have to get there from here.
So an article out of a publication called Fast Company just a couple of days ago, they talked about some of these innovations, and one of them was called ambient documentation, which you could also say would be generative AI documentation. And in this article, it was interesting. They said that they came up with the average amount of time a doctor spends on documentation is more than 3.2 hours per day. Now, this isn't just chiropractic, obviously. Right. We're talking about hospital systems. And so doing that. Now, what's interesting is that AI technology that's currently being used, this isn't like, oh, let's talk about using it. Kaiser Permanente and Mayo Clinic are using ambient documentation or generative AI documentation. And this is how it works. It's pretty amazing. The instrument that's monitoring the doctor and the patient, it could be a phone, it could be a tablet, it could be whatever. It is listening to every word being said by both the doctor, the patient, anyone in the room.
Oh, boy.
And it extrapolates out what is the relevant conversation to documentation, and it creates that documentation for the doctor. So you can literally be face-to-face once again with your patient, not with your back to them in a laptop, but talking to them, and the documentation is happening concurrently. Now, obviously, the doctor should and would review that for a signature, but imagine that you can sit there, have your patient walk in, put them on the table, have the conversation, adjust them, maybe just put out into the ethers your listings and what you found, and all of that is documented and it's ready for you to review and sign that moment.
I know everybody just fell to their knees and said, give it to me. I want it. But like everything else, there's pluses and minuses. So the question becomes, from a medical legal perspective, what do you do with all that information? So if there is a note that's generated by this procedure that Paul just described, or something similar to it, so now you have this note. And of course, you do have to check it for accuracy. So you do have to review the note. And let's say you do that. And now you sign off on the note. You have your final note that was AI generated. You never touched a keyboard for the most part. But there is a whole bunch of other recorded information that is now not part of the, quote, official note. From a medical legal perspective, if there was ever a challenge to that note, would that information be admissible? Would that information be of value or even accessible? So is it stored and just not used? Is it, once the note is created, is it deleted? But we know nothing's ever really deleted. So from a medical legal perspective, there's a lot of issues that need to be worked out here, because that note may not be just the completed signed off note from a legalistic perspective. It may actually include all that other data. And now they say, I want to hear the whole visit. I want to hear every word that was said that day, because there's a question about what it is that's actually in that note, and what's the, what's the perspective of that note taken from the whole visit, from the whole visit's conversation. So everything has the good and the bad side of it.
Let's take it a little bit further, too, before we hit on the cautionary tales. Mm-hmm. What's also being put into practice is autonomous coding. So believe it or not, through that documentation from the conversation, the AI can extrapolate the ICD-10 codes and the CPT codes and generate and send out that bill before the patient even leaves the parking lot. Can you imagine that? I know all of us coders and billers and scribes are saying, well, I guess we're out of business. And I guess potentially that could happen. We never know. But one of the things we'll talk about in the cautionary tales is about human intervention and oversight, which is important, obviously. But I thought that was interesting because as ICD-10, as we know, changes or it updates every October 1st date of service, right? And we've all run into an encounter that we use a code September 30th and then October 2nd. Why is my claim rejecting? Because you didn't listen to Tools of Practice ICD-10 update video. That's why.
Yeah, exactly.
If you had done that and used our quick reference guide, guess what? You would have saved yourself the trouble. But autonomous or ambient documentation coding could actually save you all that trouble.
So now you're saying, well, wait a minute. Now, if I have to go through the bother of reading every note and critiquing it and making sure it's accurate, is it really saving me any time from generating the note? So, and that's something that will definitely become part of the quality control. Remember, HIPAA and everything government goes by the premise that it's what you know or should have known. So you can't blame your AI program for not knowing what the correct diagnosis was, because you should have known enough to check that note and make sure it is correct. So there's definitely we have a long way to go before all of what we're talking about here gets into our everyday life. But again, there's a lot of good things that can happen. It helps us with research. It may get us less staff. It may, who knows, there may be less error once we get it up and running, but we're not quite there yet.
Let me ask you if this is a positive or a negative.
Yeah. Good luck.
They're starting to or are already using what they call AI agents. So, when you get on a website and you need help, right? Whether you're buying something or you call a company on the phone, I don't care if it's an insurance company. I was on Amazon last night, right? Because I had to return. I was trying to get a replacement part for something I purchased, and it was something I broke. Actually, my wife broke, but I'll take the blame for it.
Not anymore.
Yeah. Right. So I'm on the Amazon site and I'm trying to communicate. So I start a chat and I'm explaining it. I'm explaining it again. It's all automated. Finally, I said, well, let me just type in the word representative. They didn't offer for me to do that. I just did it on my own. Finally got somebody, quote unquote, live. And 30 minutes later, 3 agents later, they were able to return the item and send me a new one, even though I told them it was my fault that I broke it. I thought I earned the time on that one.
Right.
Now, let's turn that into Dr. Davini when you are trying to get some help through your health carrier's member portal, and now you have to talk to an AI agent and not a human person ever. And they're going to run you through a series of questions and answers to try to get you the healthcare that you need. Do you think that's a positive or a negative?
No, this is exactly what I'm saying, is that we're at that point now where it's probably more tedious than helpful. It may get better. Not may get better. It actually will get better. But the biggest promise of AI is that we can offer personalized healthcare. And that means putting all the data together that we talked about and coming up with something that's specific to you, because no individual can compile and analyze all the data at one time. But for us to get there right now is exactly what Paul said. You got to go through these series of, sometimes in my case, when I experience these chats, these generalized benign questions that don't really get you to where you want to go until finally you just scream and yell at it, representative. So we're not there yet, but you can see where we might start approaching that as these programs become more and more sophisticated. We were talking about this the other day, and the amount of electrical energy that your electricity alone that needs to be generated to power AI is becoming astronomical. So we don't have the grid capacity to handle this type of intelligence.
It's funny you say that. We've read that, I think it's Google bought a shelved nuclear power plant and they're going to revive it because of the amount of energy AI consumes is incredible. Now, what's interesting is and I ran into this article. It was published a few days ago, and it talked about the increase in asthma attacks based on the fact that the energy consumption of AI has increased so dramatically that these non-clean power plants are pumping out more energy, causing more pollution. I'm not kidding you. That's what this article says.
I don't doubt it at all.
To these air pollution and emission impacts in the U.S., the researchers used a tool provided by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. They calculated that nationally, data centers will have an overall public health cost that may exceed $20 billion by 2030. This is just because of our energy needs for AI. How crazy is that? I thought that was nuts.
It is. And as they, like you say, resurface some of these nuclear power plants or just the demand for power, take AI for one. Electric cars, someday we may actually be able to use them. It's just reaching that point now where the demand for power is exceeding our ability to generate it right now. And yet we're still trying to put all this stuff in place. So it's interesting, not even talking about the asthma effect that you just mentioned. I'll tell you a quick story. It's kind of when I was in school back in 1979, I remember listening to my x-ray teacher who brought in a friend of his who was an inspector for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
No.
And he was inspecting the Cordoba nuclear power plant, which was about 15, 20 miles north of Davenport, Iowa, where I went to school. And he was staying in Davenport, which we all just laughed and said, oh, because he's staying here to be with his friends and spend time. But one of my classmates did say, why are you staying here when you're like 15, 20 miles away from where you have to do your assignment? And his answer was, and I am not exaggerating, it's pretty close to a quote. He said, you wouldn't get me to stay within 10 miles of one of those places.
Wow.
And this is the guy who says they're safe. Yeah. So, and that was 1979. And so here we are with plants that could be easily that old, still functioning.
Well, we hope things get better in technology.
That's right. Yeah. When AI starts running on nuclear power plants, then we know
they probably are.
They probably are now, Does all this sound like Terminator to you, Paul?
It does. I'm a sci-fi geek as you are, so it all sounds like all of that stuff. So I'm sure what's floating in everyone's head, including yours, is what is the federal government doing about all this, right? Well, let me answer my own question. So the FDA had their inaugural meeting of the Digital Health Advisory Committee. This was a week or two ago.
These were actually real people, right?
These were real people,
Yes.
supposedly real people.
Yeah.
And they had a meeting, and they had 4 takeaways. Do you want to guess what the 4 takeaways would be from this FDA meeting on AI, generative AI specifically? Well, I'll tell you. We'll go through the 4 of them one at a time. The first one, I'm not sure if these are any particular order. The article didn't say, but patients want to know when AI is being used with their healthcare. So I thought that was interesting. 91%, according to the survey, of patients wanted to be informed if AI is used in their care decisions or communications. I'm sure they're not being informed right now.
No. And if I may interject, as this whole process becomes more and more every day, there's going to be that point where they won't be telling you because it will be the only way it goes.
Do you want to know what the second one is? The second one is health equity is at the heart of the debate around generative AI. So if we dovetail it back to power needs, are some of these communities that can't or support the power needs of AI, are they going to be left behind, especially in the beginning? It's something to think about, right? On these underserved
we still have communities in this country that don't have the internet.
We do?
Yes. Yeah,
let me know where. I'd like to live there a few days a year. You know what I mean?
I know. Actually, I was going to say they're probably rural, but they probably don't live where I live, where it's not rural, and I still can't get my internet to work correctly.
So the third one is hospitals are still developing best practices for generative AI. You know what my takeaway from that headline was, the third one, was that we're relying on the people that are using the AI to come up with the best practices for AI.
Here's a scary thought, because I read an article and what they said was that the complexity of generative AI is so extreme that they're going to need generative AI programs to run the generative AI programs. So basically, machine running machine. Again, Terminator, Paul?
Well, here's what Robert Califf, the FDA commissioner, had to say on that very subject. This is a quote. "I have looked far and wide. I do not believe there is a single healthcare system in the United States that's capable of validating an AI algorithm that's put into place in a clinical care system." So now we know the opinion of the FDA on AI, at least at the moment.
And I'm going to circle it back to chiropractic for us, because we know, as much as the insurance companies love us, all these algorithms are being developed, and they're being developed to generate recommendations, conclusions, treatment programs, personalize it to the patient or whatever. So if a patient walks into a medical office and their chief complaint is something common to chiropractic, my question, which is not answered right now, are we going to be included in that algorithm as a profession?
Here, let me boost your confidence, or lack thereof, on that one. The American Medical Association recommended that the FDA institute ongoing validation requirements to ensure AI tools perform safely and equitably. Let me ask you a question. Do you think the AMA is going to include chiropractic?
And there's the rub. Right? Exactly. This is what we're saying as a profession. So now, as much as we struggle to not just get ourselves included, which we've mentioned before may actually have been the biggest trap ever, because now that we're included, they have a way to control what they pay us, and that has its own problems, as we know. But now that we're included, we'll have to watch all this inclusion issue. Now we have to make sure that we're included in the actual process of creating these algorithms, or we're going to be left out in the dark again.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
And, speaking about the caveats to AI, right? The fourth thing the FDA took away with their digital committee was how to build a process of spotting, reporting errors. Interesting statistics. So what's interesting is that the tools for AI in medicine, a lot of them circle around radiology right now. And there's no regulation per se in that. They did a study, and they looked at 3,000 reports, as well as comparing the AI-generated impression to the final edited version. The AI-generated impression had a clinical significant error rate of 4.8%, while the final result edited by a radiologist was 1%. So AI isn't...
It's not there yet.
Quite there yet.
Right. But let me tell you a cautionary tale. And this goes back many years now, where a lot of you will relate in the profession. We all may remember the time where we were given money to install electronic health record systems. And back at the time, they were talking about certifications, level 1, level 2, level 3. So you go, okay, they get us to put these machines now, and the whole point of the certification process is to get all these machines on the same page, talking the same language, so that, in theory, one machine can talk to the other. It's not one machine speaking French and the other one speaking English. So they've generally been very successful at doing that, at least in the medical field and, in part, the chiropractic field. Now, couple that with the fact that we have ICD-10 in place right now, going from 14,000 ICD codes to 78,000 ICD codes, which means we went from a symptom-based set of codes, cervicalgia and lumbalgia and all these codes that basically just spit back in Latin what the patient told us in English. And we have all these condition-related symptoms. And they want you to direct your diagnoses to be specific to the symptoms. So now we have these computers that can talk to each other. We have these universal diagnoses that are more specific to a condition, not generalized. So they can go in theory, right now, they have the capability. It's not happening, but not to say they couldn't do it. They can go and analyze the amount of treatment per diagnosis. And they can evaluate whether or not you are intra or interprofessional as far as the effectiveness of your treatment. So they can compare you to the chiropractor down the street and say, geez, chiropractor down the street treated that same condition for 10 visits, you took 20. We're going to recommend everybody go to the chiropractor down the street. And not only that, we're going to give the chiropractor down the street a bonus for keeping the treatment down less. And then they're also going to compare us to other professionals like physical therapists. And they're going to say, well, geez, physical therapists do it for this much and chiropractors do it for that much. Our algorithm is going to recommend physical therapy and not chiropractic. And that's assuming we're in the algorithm. So all of the infrastructure that they need to pretty much take over control has been building for years and years and years now. Scary.
It is scary. And when you look at more of the potential hazards, let's go back to malpractice, right? So I have an article here from a few days ago about the future of AI in healthcare, and it talks about the tasks that some doctors have now about looking at all the data on patient care, the uptick that we've all seen in malpractice cases of all kinds. But now, what if that malpractice case centers around an AI-powered decision?
Like, who's at fault?
Right.
Good question.
Will malpractice cover it? Are you on the hook? What if there was a problem with the AI decision-making tool? You weren't aware of it. Is the manufacturer of that AI decision-making tool now on the hook?
Goes back to the fact that you have to absolutely monitor everything generated by AI. So at this point in time, and we're not putting down AI, we believe that this is just like we're saying, we're trying to make you aware that it's a good thing in the future, possibly. And it's coming, whether we think it's a good thing or not, or whether it will be a good thing or not, it is coming. And we can't stop it because it is the future. And it will have its place in chiropractic as far as reducing all kinds of issues and at least administratively in our practices. Hopefully there won't be a machine that can adjust a patient.
Hey, did you know that I haven't seen it myself, but there's a machine that can massage a patient with no human intervention? It's a company out of New York that you yes or no on this health questionnaire. If there's any yeses, you can't get a robot massage, as it were.
Right. And sooner or later, it may reach that point where it's all you have to offer. So basically, we're coming to the end here where we're saying, what is the bottom line? The bottom line here is you are still responsible for everything. So even though something may or may not be AI assisted, AI augmented, AI generated, or it's ambient AI, whatever terms you want to use, it's all still your responsibility. The government and, including HIPAA will always say what you know or should have known. So none of this takes away that responsibility. So it's going to be that cautionary tale, like I said before. Remember, all that glitters is not gold, at least right now.
But with that food for thought, we want to thank you for listening to another episode of All Things Chiropractic.
Thank you very much.
I'm Paul Andrews.
And Dr. Mark Davini.
Thanks for listening to All Things Chiropractic. We'd love to hear from you. Visit allthingschiropractic.com with comments, episode ideas, or questions. Or connect with us on Facebook and Instagram at All Things Chiropractic Podcast. Be sure to join Dr. Mark Davini and Paul Andrews next time for another episode of All Things Chiropractic.